Last month, 22-year-old medical student Deanne Stryker was studying at her town library in Winchester when she was stabbed 20 times and killed. And as shocking and disturbing as this was when it happened, the more we learn about the man accused, the more disturbing the case becomes. We now know that 23-year-old Jeffrey Yao was well known to police, having frequently exhibited unsettling and threatening behavior going back to his days in high school. Police had brought him to the hospital for a psychological evaluation several times over the last few years, where he was frequently treated. Yao's attorney says he was delusional at the time of the crime and did not know the victim. I'm now joined by that attorney, J.W. Carney, who is, also representing Whitey Bulger. Jay, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. You were quoted in the Globe the other day saying, "I commend the Winchester police for how appropriately they dealt with Jeffrey over the years, recognizing he had serious mental problems. There's no way anyone could have known that Jeff's delusions led him to engage in this tragedy." It's the second sentence that I don't understand. When you've had so many contacts by police, when you've bullied someone on Facebook, allegedly, when you've said you're asked police to kill you, how can you say there's no way anyone could have known that Jeff's delusions would lead him to engage in this kind of tragedy?
There are hundreds of thousands of people in our communities who have mental illness, some of it serious, most of it treated, but much of it untreated, and they survive. They're treated appropriately by police when they come to their attention. They do what the Winchester police did in this case, which is take him to a hospital, hook him up with mental illness specialists, a psychiatrist, because he hasn't usually done anything that warrants an arrest.
But you don't think the volume of contacts here between the police and complaints by neighbors was such that some action should have been taken other than resolving the particular problem of the moment, maybe on behalf of his family, maybe on behalf of the police? No?
What the family could have tried was to bring an action in a district court and ask that their son be involuntarily committed.
Did they?
No. And the police could have done the same thing, and they didn't. The reason is the law doesn't permit you to be committed just for having a mental illness. You have to present a direct threat of harm to yourself or to others.
Let me be clear. I hope no one watching this thinks that you should be committed because you have a mental illness involuntarily. The question is, does your mental illness rise to the level, as you suggested, where it's a threat? So if you don't believe the law as currently exists would have allowed a family member or law enforcement to have him committed and protected from himself, should the law be changed here? Should the law be strengthened so that a Jeffrey Yao wouldn't have been free to do what he did here?
I don't think that that's the policy choice that most people want to have.
What's the right policy choice so that something like this doesn't happen again?
We'll never prevent this from not happening again. These tragedies periodically occur when someone becomes extremely delusional, as Jeffrey did, acts on those delusions, and engages in conduct that ends with a tragedy like this, which is so heartbreaking for both families.
Well, but let's get back to what I was discussing a few minutes ago with the Council President and Jennifer Nassour. What if there was a red flag law that didn't just extend to firearms, but extended to knives like this, that if a court determined, based on an application of a parent or a law enforcement official, that a Jeffrey Yao provided extreme risk to the community, why is that not an appropriate extension of the law that would allow a judge to decide, is J.W. Carney right, or is the family member of law enforcement right, and he should have his weapons, including a knife, taken away from him? What's wrong with that?
I agree with you. I think the law should be changed to take away a person's weapons if he's showing great signs of mental illness. In this case, Jeffrey's knife would have been taken away from him.
So you would support such a thing?
Yes.
Am I right that you've confirmed that your client did not know the victim?
Yes.
So is this random, meaning the worst of wrong place at the wrong time kinds of thing?
What the evidence will show is his delusions were of the paranoid type, where he thought everyone was speaking about him, conspiring about him. He was listening to voices in his head telling him what to do, and it could have been anybody in that seat. And if that person were there, that person would have been stabbed.
I don't know this firsthand, but from having read about it, I would say a lot of people in Winchester think the system failed them, and I'm sure the family feels that. Do you feel the system failed your client?
No, I don't.
Do you feel that he didn't deserve a higher level of care and ultimately protection than he got from?
A series of medical professionals, psychiatrists, interviewed him and made the determination that he didn't present a danger to himself or to others. I've had many cases in my career where this exact thing happened.
What do you want? What are you going to ask this court to do with your client? What do you think is appropriate punishment? Punishment may be the wrong choice of words, but what is the appropriate outcome in your estimation for Jeffrey O?
That Jeffrey is found not guilty by reason of mental illness, that he be committed to a maximum security hospital and remain in that hospital until he's declared by a psychiatric team to be not a danger to himself or the
Prosecutor
community.
show any interest in such a deal to you?
Not at this stage, but I've worked out those deals with this office, the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, in a case where my client committed murder.
Who's that?
This was a person who was from Ukraine, studying at MIT, brilliant laser scientist, but he became paranoid and delusional, and he killed his roommate. Okay,
we only have a minute left here. I want to change gears. There's a new book by Jen Abelson and Chessie Prout. It's called I Have the Right To, and it's Chessie Prout was the victim of sexual assault by your former client, Owen Labrie, at St. Paul's School in New Hampshire. He was convicted of misdemeanor sexual assault and 1 felony. Did you read the book?
No, I haven't.
Do you plan to read the book?
No.
Do you know what the book says about you?
Well, I think you're going to tell me.
Let me read you a little bit what she says. He was a manipulative bully, just like his client. Carney stopped the pummeling around 4 p.m. just after asking me for the definition of a blowjob. He paused dramatically when I answered, then suggested it was time to recess. As Carney bent down to collect his papers on the table, he turned and stared at Dad, as if daring him to jump over the bench. They locked eyes and the tension was palpable. How could this man, meaning you, get away with such revolting behavior? He was the type of person who makes it so hard for victims to come forward. What's your reaction to that?
She's entitled to her opinion, and I'll defend her right to express that opinion. I know that she was very unhappy with the outcome of that trial, where the jury came back and said, no, the government hasn't proven that you were forcibly raped. I think that Chessie and Owen were both so ill-served by the adults involved in this, because if you take a look at the emails sent by Chessie in the 3 days after they had an encounter, and the text messages said by Chessie, and the comments she said to her roommate before leaving to go to see Owen, when the roommate asked her, what do you expect to do? And she said, well, I'll probably let him finger me and also blow him.
Your client was convicted of misdemeanor sexual assault, as you well know.
That's consensual sexual assault by people within 3 years of each other, where one of them is underage. It's a misdemeanor in New Hampshire, and it explicitly says a person convicted of that crime does not have to register as a sex offender.
Jay, I appreciate your time.
Okay, bud.
She'll be here next week, and we will get her response. Thank you, J.W. Carney.